think about your earliest self, so clear, so uncompromising. And then we get lured day by day into forfeiting the divine clarity that we have.
This is the Art Power Podcast. I'm Janera Solomon. In today's episode, I talk with writer, entrepreneur, and thought leader Casey Gerald. Born in Oak Cliff, Texas, Casey was recruited to play football at Yale and then went on to Harvard Business School before turning away or turning toward a new path as an independent writer and artist. He has written for New York Magazine, spoken at TED, and is a frequent contributor on MSNBC and CNN. He's also chairman of the board for Kickstarter, a crowdsourcing platform and transformative tool for artists and creators. In his memoir, There Will Be No Miracles Here, Casey tells his story. This is our first live episode, the Art Power Podcast Live. Casey Gerald came to Pittsburgh from Texas to visit us. We were so honored to be able to host Casey with our friends at True Tea Studios. True Tea's mission is to celebrate queer people of color through arts, community health, and social activism. Art Power and True Tea share a vision for creating inclusive, welcoming communities. So to be there for this conversation with the light streaming into the studio, it's just really beautiful. There is something very special, very magical about being in a room with others, to share, to learn, to listen, to reflect. Here's my conversation with Casey Gerald. So welcome to Pittsburgh, Casey Gerald, and to the Art Power Podcast Live.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled. I'm thinking about being in Pittsburgh, coming from Texas to Pittsburgh. I'm thinking of Alvin Ailey and I'm thinking of Billy Strayhorn.
Yes.
And I'm feeling grateful for both them and the work they left and the work they continued to do through us. So thank you for having me. In 22 degrees. Y'all know y'all wrong for that.
That's when we have people at our best.
I brought my face moisturizer.
Yeah. You have to carry in the bag. Yes. Oh, well, I know if anybody who comes to Pittsburgh from Texas or Los Angeles below 50 degrees loves us. So thank you.
It's so good.
Much. I'm curious about, so many things. So first, what did you study at Yale?
I studied graduation.
You're funny.
I studied getting the fuck out. But no, but the degree says political science and whatnot.
The Harvard Business School, in a way that feels like a straight line.
We were just talking about your lines. Janera had this fantastic metaphor of like, there's a line. People need to know you can take detours, but you need to know that's a detour. A lot of the problem for me, and it seems for many of us, is that we find ourselves on a detour, but people convince us that's the line.
Mm-hmm.
The line is go get that degree. The line is go do that thing. When what is only struck me in retrospect was a detour for my soul. That was a spiritual detour, though it is on the material plane, the line.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
You work for, in a way.
Right. 10 years ago, last month, 27 at the time, I was on the cover of Fast Company in November 2014, and I couldn't get out of bed. And I didn't know what had happened. And I just said, shit, I better go see a doctor or something, just to try to figure out what was going on. And so I left New York and I went to Texas. And about a month after moving, 2 months, that would have been September, I got a call that one of my, like a little brother to me who I'd helped recruit to Yale, he was from St. Louis. We had very similar childhoods. And got a call that he had committed suicide. And I had never had anyone close to me take their own life. And also I had just talked to him the month before. It had been his birthday. And I said, happy birthday. He said, it's only getting better, bro. My motto had been, I remember when he first got there, I said, Isaiah, nobody gives a shit what you've been through. You need to handle it. And what struck me in the wake of that was that I had taught him to be that person. And it all catches up to you. And so I took a nap. It was the middle of the day. I took a nap. And he came to me in a dream. And he's sitting in a booth in a diner. And he sort of leans back and he says, Casey, we did a lot of things that we wouldn't advise anyone we love to do. And then I woke up, most of my life, I was poor, orphaned, queer boy in Texas in the 90s. So I had more time feeling that no one really valued me than I did feeling everybody thinks I'm awesome. Mm-hmm. I didn't really care what people were saying at that time because I never trusted what people felt about me. Mm-hmm. My mom left when I was 12 or 13, and so I spent a great deal of time as a kid being other people's problem and being very much an inconvenience for my own family. My sister adopted me when I was 15. She was 19. And I had been like living in people's floors. I was kind of like a, alley cat or something, And then word got out that I was going to Yale. And they put posters up at every public school in Dallas with my face that said, look who's going to Yale. If he can do it, you can too. Those posters are still up. And as foolish as I am, I'm not a fool. I had 18 years in a body, 17 years in a body of being a problem and not important to all of these people.
The lack of validation. And at the same time, Casey, you're like this excellently performing person. Like there's also this drive, this like
there's an expectation.
To excellence.
There's an expectation. And I tried for a bit in business school to take the jobs that would pay very well. I spent a summer at McKinsey, and the money was so delicious. And I said, wow. And they had us up at the St. Regis Hotel in Houston. And I said, wow. And everything
St. Regis hotels are nice.
Everything was expensed. And I said, wow. And then I got there the first or second day and I said, wow, I want to die. This is horrible. This is awful.
What was horrible?
Gosh, the team I was working on was working with a food distribution company in Houston. And part of my job for the summer was to figure out why the frozen fish division was not profitable.
Oh, my Lord.
And you've just known me for a morning.
Oh, yeah, kill me now. I mean,
truly.
No offense.
But for real, I said, this is life. This is crazy. But what's so funny, and this just shows you how much, what really was depressing was having to you had to like wear these slacks and like the same plain button down shirt every day. And that was really the most depressing thing for me. It just felt like so I started toward the end. It got real bad toward the end. I said, I couldn't make it. And I would take the little wino bottles out of the hotel and Literally, I would go in the bathroom. I would go in the bathroom before my meetings. I said, I need some help. That was bad. So I said, okay, well, this is not going to work. The work is not worth your life.
No. Anything that starts to feel like, oh, wait a minute, I'm losing myself. When I have that awareness, my immediate next thing is I got to do something now about this. Yeah, once I have the awareness, like, oh, wait, I'm losing myself here somehow, there's a pause. And I want to check, see what's going on. So I'm wondering, the moment where you're, okay, this fast company life, not it. Turning toward a creative life, a writing life. What were you hearing then? Because I can imagine, like, he's on the cover of Fast Company and this is successful and he's making lots of money, which we are going to circle to. And then also you're hearing, like, no, this isn't what I need to do or want to do, and I'm turning in this different direction. So tell us about that. How did you navigate that?
Thankfully, I had never trusted external validation. So that helps a bit. Yeah. And also me recovering 5-year-old me who boycotted nap time. You know, I was completely unhinged as a child and totally clear, you know, no ifs, ands, or buts about being a free person. I remember being 7 and my dad, when I lived with my parents, my dad and I were disagreeing about something, and I just sort of lost it. And I said, listen, you have your rights, I have my rights, you know, and I'll just have to kill myself to get some freedom around here. I mean, really, that was 7 years old. So how that kid becomes this grown person who is so imprisoned by the detour line of the American standard of success is a great tragedy. But the great gift of grace is that I never forgot being 14 and hearing Lauryn Hill's Unplugged album. And all my cousins were like, this fool has lost it. Because I was just listening to this thing on repeat. And I was like, I ain't even lived enough to know what she's talking about. You know? But and so at some point you remember that interlude when she says, repent. Let go of all that stuff that's killing you.
Yes.
You got a steering wheel to turn around, you know. Yes. So that's what the writing became for me, to get back to the real line. And you're far more self-directed in that coming back. Often I can't sense it. I need someone. After a nervous breakdown will help. I don't come to anything willingly. I don't come to anything right willingly. I go, if it's bad, listen, I'll show up. I'll be first in line. What is it? We're going to camp overnight, you know, outside the store. If it's going to ruin my life, hey, give it to me. Right. But if I really, if it's something truly nourishing, I tend to have come to those things unwillingly. And in many ways, that's how I came to be a writer. You know, I had never intended to be a writer. And I went and did all these things, and people said, oh, you've really made it. You know, this is great. You know, you've gone to all these schools, you've done all this stuff, you know. And I said, well, shit, if this is what making it feels like, I should have never tried, because this is horrible, you know. But I just knew I needed a way out. And so writing for me became, from the very beginning, just a way to try to trace my cracks with words.
When did you come to that?
One of my best friends from business school, her brother was the one that helped convince me to be a writer. He was a writer. He had a great agent. I didn't even know this. It's just, you know, I often say that I was lost and God or my ancestors or some came and grabbed me out and made that transitional period as easy as possible so I wouldn't question it.
So did money, and I don't even know if I should ask it this way. I want to say when did the financial realities of the turning toward, like, okay, I'm going to go live this independent creative artist life and my bills will be paid. How?
Well, you know what's so funny is I didn't really think about it. I really didn't. It didn't occur to me that I was forfeiting a lot of money to become an artist. I also didn't think about it as becoming an artist. You know, also I was probably the lowest paid person I graduated business school with. So I was like, you know, I thought I had already made the sacrifice, you know. But I got a huge advance. You know, how in the hell am I going to complain about being paid $100,000 to write a book? So they gave me all this money. I just thought, wow, this is how it's going to be. Being a writer is grand, you know. But I didn't realize that if they knew what book I was going to turn in, they would not have given me. You know, they thought, I remember the first agent I talked to, he said, you just really got to write a book. And I said, about what? And he said, well, it doesn't matter, just write one. But the two models we have in mind for you are Dreams from My Father and Audacity of Hope.
Oh, Lord.
And I said, whoa, wait a minute. That was the first inkling I got. But then if I'm in the moment, even though I am philosophically opposed to XYZ, in the moment I can feel without thinking that this is right.
So with that energy and with that experience, then the decision to say, okay, I'm going to be a writer. I'm gonna, or at least maybe I don't know what all of the future is, but I'm turning away from this other thing and I'm turning towards something else. That felt like, you know, yes, I can do this.
Didn't feel like I could do it, but it felt like I was going to do it. You know, I got paid all this money to start this path, though they did not know what path I was actually on. And at a certain point in the writing, I just couldn't keep going. I just felt what they would call writer's block, but what I now understand to be a cosmic message to sit your ass down and listen to something else. I grew up in a totally segregated community. I mean, there were no white people. There might have been I think there was one white student in my middle school. You know, the most important thing in my life was to grow up in segregation. It was, there is nothing, you don't realize it at the time, but we knew the history of the country. We knew that there was racism. We knew that, but it never occurred to me or to anyone that I was around that it was because we were inferior. It wouldn't have never crossed our mind. And to see extraordinary Black people everywhere. I mean, the tax man was Black. You know, the landscapers were Black. You know, Ben and Son's convenience store. I mean, that was our 7-Eleven. You know, Mr. Ben was Black. These people were, our principals were Black. Our teachers. I am one of the least interesting people that I knew growing up. Mm. You know, my grandfather had been a prominent pastor in Dallas, started preaching when he was 16, paid in canned goods. He was the first genius I ever knew. He was not a profoundly educated person. My 5th grade teacher, Gwendolyn Davis, who told me, you will do the oratorical competition. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Who came in one day as my parents were strung out on the streets and said, you're going to be the president. I said, what? You know, so I thank God so much. I grew up around Black people. There was never, I was so fortunate to be raised by Black people who knew that this world had nothing to give them to justify their worth. Stories like Dreams from My Father, stories like Audacity of Hope, stories like the story they'd like to tell about me, which is, this poor kid rose above his circumstances and pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and if he can do it, you can too. There's a propaganda machine and I understand now why they paid me so much money, because it's a small fraction of what they'd have to pay if people knew the truth of their society. Mm. You need someone like me to keep the steam down. And most of us stick with that. I should clarify, I probably will never make that kind of money again now that people know what work I turn in and how I turned it in. You know, my second book advance was less than a fifth of my first book advance. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so there's a tremendous trade-off.
Did that feel difficult for you? That like, oh, wait, I could hold this line.
I think I would if I could, but I truly can't. And also, I work in a tradition that goes back to Frederick Douglass, who would have been killed for reading and writing. And I don't know. It had to have been many generations who prepared and made me possible, because I don't have that kind of courage. You see what I'm saying?
That word courage feels like such a critical notion when we think about choosing an artistic life, choosing an independent artistic life, or any kind of turning against what doesn't feel right and turning towards something that feels right, that requires so much courage.
I really don't take a lot of credit. I don't know how I would be possible without those times where sometimes I just met them today, who said, that ain't you. Don't let that person talk to you like that. I need that kind of guard friend. So really, so much for me is about accepting that there's this larger, beautiful conspiracy going on. And the best way to know it, the best way to know that you're in it, is to feel how you're feeling. Sometimes if something happens and it feels wrong, just shut up and see what's happening. And sometimes there won't be some grand thing, but you'll at least have the peace that the world didn't end. I say that to say, it was recovering this thing that we all have. Think about your earliest self. So clear, so uncompromising. And then we get lured day by day into forfeiting the divine clarity that we have.
Do you have an idea now, like for you, when you think ahead, what success feels like for you?
Success for me feels like peace. And so sometimes when people say, well, what are you working on next? I say, I'm working on being well.
Oh, yes.
I'm working on my joy. I'm working on my peace.
Some people don't know what to do with that. It gets scary. It's like, oh my God.
What's the fear?
What am I doing? What am I doing?
When I was sick in business school, and my grandmother, who's now passed, Clarice, called me, and she said, "Oh, you got to go. You need to go to get into bed." I said, "Granny, I got to go to class." And she said, "No, you're going to bed because you're sick and you need some medicine, yada yada." And I said, "Well, I'll do that as soon as I get out of class." She said, "Casey, you tell them I told you to go to bed because you were smart before we sent you to Harvard." Being so uncomfortable with just sitting down and not having a point or a goal, I say that from a place of having exhausted the alternative.
Mm-hmm. I want to turn to our beautiful audience, studio audience. We have a microphone over there. We welcome a question or a comment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. What is your self-care plan?
Well, first off, one of my more recent ones is that I stopped drinking on balance.
So, what do you mean? On balance.
Well, I had an unhealthy relationship. It was a kind of a coping deal, and if I couldn't sleep, but I had a hard time believing that I could withstand difficult emotions without help. I try to meditate and pray every day. Morning pages I do most days, helps me a lot, in part just to not censor myself and to let things out. One financial self-care plan that might be illegal, but which has been very helpful, was I stopped paying my student loans. It was crazy. I mean, I was just like sick with worries. Like, gosh, $1,000 a month was going to this stuff, and if not more. And then I was like late a couple of times, like, oh, this is ruining my credit score. It's like, gosh. And then one day I said, or something said, well, you have never needed a credit score to find a place to live. So what you worried about? This is actually where my community is very important. My brother Hisham, my brother friend Hisham, is Moroccan. Hisham's like one of those, Emirates first class Moroccans. He's like very rude. He's like not at all gentle. It's like, you got to pay that off. I was like, okay, great. So yes, it is that balance of knowing that some debt, credit card debt, horrible, pay it off. Those kinds of things are all, that's in my financial, the student loan companies will get there when we get there. Mm-hmm. I started taking walks every day. I go out the lawn on the Texas State Capitol. The grass is so good. And I go a couple times a week and I just put my bare feet in the grass. And that alone, this actually is scientific, but that aside, Shaka Khan endorses it. Actually, there's a great video on her TikTok, because she has a beautiful lawn, of course. And just a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes with your bare feet in the grass is so restoring. The earth wants to give us so much love and nourishment. The sun too. So anyway, those are just some very practical things.
I'm going to offer one too, which we talked about this morning, which is to think about the time of the day where you feel most powerful, most like you're like, yes, I've got this. Whatever time of day that is, make sure you preserve a good amount of that time for yourself and for things you like to do and want to do. Don't give all that time away to other people.
Can you talk to us about like community, the value of community, what community brings to your art practice? So much of what people are trying to do, we need each other to do it. But like, what does that look like for you?
Why I'm pausing is because I really am a loner, and I really do tend to feel strange. And certain words at a almost kind of visceral level just kind of freak me out. I have this sort of fear of entrapment, and I have this fear of trusting people, letting people close. And so when I hear I say community, but if I am making an active choice, I tend to choose to be alone. I believe that other souls chose to come at the same time as my soul chose to come. And I believe that many of us are finding each other. And if we were supposed to walk this path together, whether as lovers or as friends or as audience mates for one afternoon, it's going to happen. And if we can be in the space to not be thinking, oh gosh, I hit this zit on my face, they ain't going to invite me to nothing else, I said that wrong, whatever. If you just say, thank you, wow, you won't feel judged or condemned or ashamed or outcast. You won't feel self-conscious. You won't feel anxious. You won't feel angry. You'll feel a level of curiosity and excitement and openness to things that you otherwise would be like, no, I got something else to do. And you still might say, no, I got something else to do, and they will show up at your door and they'll drag you out, even if they just met you yesterday.
So that I am willing to share and connect, free of thinking of myself and what if the person doesn't like each other and all that fear pulled away. That's community making on one side. The other side of it is saying yes. I'm not going to shame anyone for when you feel to say no. There are moments where it's like, no, thank you. However, just tune in to the connection between what's available for you and what you're saying no to. Just pay some attention to that.
Why I'm so grateful to Perry Chen, who founded Kickstarter and who called one day and said, hey, do you want to be on the Kickstarter board? And Perry and I had just been friends for years, and I had sworn off any involvement in business whatsoever. I said, I'm done with this. But we kept talking about it, and I didn't even know it paid. And it wasn't until last spring when he asked me to take over as chairman for him that he finally told me, he said, I knew you were broke. So that's why I asked you to join the board, So I think about that a lot. There are some of us, and this is why community, what does it look like for us in this time as some of us get money more easily than others? How do we move beyond the sense that money is our money? It's my money. I got this money. I earned this money. How do we see that we are, if there are some of us who can draw a bigger harvest, how do we really, really understand in a deep way and then operationalize that the harvest is a community
Absolutely.
thing? Community is a gumbo. And you got to bring something. I think when you're talking about yes and no, that is not just yes, I will, no, I won't. That is an energy of openness and closeness, scarcity, and
abundance.
Yes. Maya Angelou, in her eulogy for Baldwin, she said, we met each other when we were young enough to believe that we were each individually salvageable. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of the yeses. Thank you for the warmth. Thank you for being generous. Thank you, Casey Gerald, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Casey's incredibly generous. So much knowledge, so much experience, expertise to share. He also encourages us to think about what really drives us. What are we passionate about? What's essential for us? And that when we make choices that are rooted in the essence of who we are and who we'd like to be and who we aspire to be, it's worth it. This has been the Art Power Podcast. The show is a co-production of Row Home Productions and Art Power, a public benefit corporation working to bring artists sustainability, dignity, and freedom. We've recently launched our first product, Tortoise. Visit our website to learn more. Thank you once again to True Tea Studios for hosting us and being our partner in welcoming Casey to Pittsburgh. Check out Casey's memoir, There Will Be No Miracles Here, at his website, CaseyGerald.com. Follow him on social media at Casey Gerald. Our producers are Jackson Roach and Kristen Vermelia. Our managing producer is Alex Lewis. Mixing and mastering by John Myers. Subscribe, review, and tell your friends about the Art Power Podcast. To learn more, visit artpower.io. I'm Janera Solomon. Thank you for listening.
Row Home Productions.